Okay, good Tavach, a freilich Tavach. This week we're going to read Parshas Chayesara, which begins with Avram's acquisition of a burial plot for his wife Sarah. And in his purchase of this burial plot, he demonstrates not only that the Jewish people have a right to the land of Israel and they have a right to own the land of Israel because God says so, but Avram, by the purchase of this burial plot, he actually brought this acquisition of the land of Israel into the physical world in a very tangible way with a financial transaction. He bought a portion of the land of Israel. So on that note, to share a few stories that demonstrate the truth of Man Malki Rabbanan. The Gemara says, who are the kings? The rabbis and tzaddikim, that with the power of the Torah, there is a change in the physical world. And that the physical world is affected by the laws of the Torah. When the Alter Rebbe was in prison, he, on one occasion, he was being led through a courtyard, and he saw Nikolai, who later became the emperor of Russia, Nikolai I. Nikolai, even as a child, he was very cruel, and he was waving this baton. He was a prince of the royal family, and he was waving this baton, playing with the baton. He was very cruel, and he would just randomly hit people. So when he saw the Alter Rebbe, he lunged at the Alter Rebbe. He wanted to see if the Alter Rebbe flinch. But instead of the Alter Rebbe flinching, the Alter Rebbe looked at him, and Nikolai was so shocked by the Alter Rebbe's impression that he couldn't come to himself. He told his tutor that he's scared. He's crying because of the sight of the Alter Rebbe. Just seeing the Alter Rebbe had this strong impression on him. And the previous Rebbe said that had the Alter Rebbe not met Nikolai, we don't know we wouldn't be able to have survived the decrees that he made against the Jewish people. Nikolai the first was the one who was responsible for the famous Cantonist decree. Made a decree that Jewish boys from the age of 9 years old should be kidnapped and kept in the Tsar's army for 25 years. So the day he was coronated, 30 years after he met the Alter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek said that the Alter Rebbe could accomplish with his vision what one of his holy peers could accomplish through speech. And his accomplishment was on a yet higher plane. Just like vision is higher than speech, the Alter Rebbe, just looking at him, made this major change in Nikolai. Nikolai, of course, wasn't transformed to become righteous by any count, but this is what weakened the decrees he made against the Jewish people. The Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, there's a long stories about his efforts to rescue Jewish children who were affected by the decrees of Nikolai. And on one occasion, during the Crimean War, Tzemach Tzedek sent 100 rubles to Nikolai to help with the war effort. But Nikolai actually returned 100 rubles, says, no, I'm not interested in this. And when I finished with the war, then I will deal with Rabbi Schneers. So the Tzemach Tzedek, one night, the Hasidim noticed that he was praying the evening prayer in his room with an unusual fire, unusual connection. And they wanted to see what was going on. So they created some kind of a way to see through the door. I don't know exactly how they chiseled in the door, but they were able to see in the door. And they saw that Tzemach Tzedek davening Ma'ariv. And he was davening with a lot of tunes and concentration. And this davening continued till he got to the words, Apidenu mi'amlochim malkeinu hagoyalenu mekafkel aritzim. Tzemach Tzedek was standing in a circle in his room, and he read the words, God saves us from kings, he redeems us from the grip of all the tyrants. When he said those words, he completed the rest of Meir very quickly. That was where the concentration like changed. And then when he finished the evening prayers, he jumped out of he walked out of the circle. Don't ask me to explain what the circle means, going out of the circle. Only thing I could think of is the famous story of Choni HaMagil, who asked Hashem to bring rain, and he's told Hashem, if you don't bring rain, I swear to you, Hashem, I'm not going out of this circle until you bring rain. So apparently, the Tzemach Tzedek had something connected to him staying in the circle, and that prayer, God saves us from kings and the grips of all tyrants. And shortly afterwards, the good news came that the 58-year-old Tsar was, until that point, was in perfect health, and suddenly he got pneumonia and he died. And his doctor didn't see any reason for Nikolai's death, but it was the same night that Tzemach Tzedek's prayer, this brought him to that caused the demise of Nikolai. A more contemporary story. Okay, actually, let's go a little closer to our history. Let's go in order. The Rebbe Rashab did not want to be under the rule of the Kaiser Wilhelm. So during World War I, in 1926, the Rebbe Rashab fled Lubavitch because he didn't want to be under Kaiser Wilhelm, who was advancing. And so he fled from Lubavitch and managed to reorganize in the city of Rostov. So on Shabbos, on the 26th of Teves, in 5677, the Rebbe Rashab recited a mimer, a discourse, and the discourse was on the words of a God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Look, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, I am giving you to be the ruler. I'm giving you the power to be the ruler over Pharaoh. And of course, the Hasidim reviewed the discourse diligently and didn't know what the broader significance of the discourse was. But some of the Hasidim sensed that there was something more about this discourse which wasn't just Torah, but it was about something that was happening in the world. The Rebbe Rashab was talking about the power that Moshe Rabbeinu needed to break Paro. And the Rebbe Rashab said that when Klippa, when the opposite of holiness, is in its full strength, the righteous tzaddikim do not have the power to completely remove it. However, Moshe Rabbeinu destroyed Pharaoh at the height of his unquestionable authority. And the reason why he was able to do this was only the power, the essence of God, power of Hashem. So shortly afterwards, the February Revolution began, a series of protests and uprisings which could not be quelled by the imperial forces. And merely weeks later, Nikolai II abdicated from the throne, nominating his brother instead. And because his brother saw there was very little chance he'd be able to make control either, that basically ended the whole concept of the Tsar. There was no more Tsars afterwards. The Rebbe once was speaking to his secretary, Rabbi Groner, shortly after the following event. What happened was there was a king of Saudi Arabia. I'm going to give my Ashkenazic pronunciation of this, which is probably way off. Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud was the king of Saudi Arabia. He lived from 1906 to 1975, and he became the king of Saudi Arabia in 1964. Saudi Arabia underwent a major change in modernization during his rule, And he didn't only influence his own territory, he was a key player in the Arab League, and he created an embargo of oil against all countries that that had relations with Israel. So, throughout the U.S. and Western Europe, he caused the price of oil to skyrocket whenever, if it was oil, because of his anti-Semitism. He made these edicts, and which are not only from Saudi Arabia, but other countries also followed his lead, and they made this embargo against all countries that had relations with Israel. So that year, in Shabbos HaGadol, the Shabbos before Passover, is called the Great Shabbos. The reason it's called the Great Shabbos is because the great miracle happened on the 10th of Nisan, a few days before Passover. The miracle was, after God gave the Jewish people the mitzvah of offering the Paschal lamb to Hashem, the Jewish people took the Paschal lamb, they brought it to their homes, and they were meant to hold it in their homes for 4 days until the day before Passover, when they were supposed to slaughter the sheep. So what happened was that their Egyptian neighbors were curious, what is our God doing in your house? And the Jews had the wherewithal to respond that Hashem is going to kill the Egyptian firstborn, is going to rescue the Jewish people, and therefore we are offering this sacrifice and thanks to God. So when the Egyptian firstborn heard that God was going to destroy all of the Egyptian firstborn, they asked the Pharaoh to release the Jewish people. But the Pharaoh refused, and they led a civil war against Egypt. So the miracle was that Egypt fought with Egypt. The Jewish people didn't have to contend with the Egyptians because the Egyptians fought with the Egyptians. There was a civil war that destroyed hundreds of thousands of Egyptians prior to the exodus of Egypt. So to commemorate this miracle of the Egyptians destroying the Egyptians, we celebrate on the Shabbos before Passover, and it's called the Great Shabbos. So in the year 5735, 1975, Rebbe spoke about how when you remember a miracle, remember an event that happened on a certain date, the divine energy that was released on that date is again summoned. And by remembering what happened on that date, you bring that back to the world. So Rebbe said, because we are thinking and talking about the miracles that happened on this day, therefore this will also cause today, in the present, that there will also be miracles. And so at that time, less than 3 days after that Farbrengen, King Faisal hosted a Majlis. Majlis is a traditional Arab event in which the king entertained his guests. So one of the guests present was his nephew, Faisal, same name. So Arabs have this thing where they kiss each other on their nose. So when his nephew approached the king to kiss him on his nose, the nephew, the prince, pulled out a pistol and he shot his uncle. He shot his uncle twice at point blank range, and they tried to figure out what was going on. Why did he do this? They couldn't figure out the motive, and so the first bullet that he had shot went into his brain, and he died immediately. So the Rebbe was in his room, and the Rebbe was looking at different requests for blessing, and the Rebbe's secretary, Rebbe Groner, was in the Rebbe's room, and suddenly the Rebbe asked, "Has anything happened to Faisal?" So Rebbe Groner said, "Yes, he was just killed by his nephew." Then the Rebbe asked about the details. How did this happen? Groner said, "There was this event, and he reached over to kiss him. When he kissed, he pulled out his gun and he shot him in the head." So the Rebbe asked about the motive. Is there a motive? And so Rebbe Groner said the reports on the radio is that the motive is unknown, but they're saying that the nephew, was unstable, so just acted crazy. He's unstable. So Rebbe looked through a few more letters. Then the Rebbe said that at splitting of the Reed Sea, there were some Jews who said that the reason why the water split was because the wind was blowing. In other words, they attributed this extraordinary miracle. There were some Jews like, yeah, the wind was blowing. Yeah, we know how this happened. The wind was blowing. So, so Rabbi Groner responded, this is what the Rebbe was referring to at the Farbrengen. The Rebbe said, "Lamakim et God kills the Egyptians with their firstborn." The Rebbe mentioned this, and this is why this is why this was happening. So the Rebbe responded, "So I see. So you're not those who don't believe in miracles." It was clearly accepting this this chain of events to be a result of the mention at the Farbrengen how God kills Egyptians with their firstborn. And that really, Baruch Hashem, was a huge relief for the Jewish people. There were other occasions before Passover where the Rebbe drew attention to this teaching of Lamakim Mitzrayim that God kills the Egyptians with their firstborn, and how commemorating this brings salvation. A similar thing also happened on Rosh Hashanah by the Tzemach Tzedek. In general, our Rebbeim were very careful not to speak at all on the night of Rosh Hashanah. Usually on Yontif and holidays, the Rebbes of Chabad would share Torah teachings, but not on the night of Rosh Hashanah. On the night of Rosh Hashanah, the custom was to be completely silent. But the Tzemach Tzedek, he had a custom that he would actually speak about politics, to direct politics. The Rebbe Marash said that my father is directing the wagon. In other words, he would speak about things going on in the world, and by doing this, he would somehow channel in the world with it, so things should flow the way they should. On that note, the Tzemach Tzedek once sent one of his Chassidim, Rebbe Aaron Belnitzer, and Rebbe Aaron Belnitzer to go to Petersburg in 5619 to take care of various issues that the government was doing to protect the Jewish people. And before Aaron Belnitzer left to Petersburg, the Rebbe Marash said, my father, Tzemach Tzedek, told Rebbe Aaron that he was a very smart, capable individual, and whenever there's a question, said Tzemach Tzedek, whenever you don't know what to do, you should think deeply, make a decision, and Yamid al Daite. Yamid al Daite literally, the way the expression is usually used, means you should then stand by your opinion. Think it through, and then whatever you think, go for it. Yamid al Daite, stand for what you know. That's the way it's usually translated. But it clearly meant something else in this scenario. Little while later, while Rabbi Aaron was on this mission, Tzemach Tzedek remarked, I pity on Aaron. He's stuck in a dilemma. He doesn't know what to do, which was surprising because no letter came from Rabbi Aaron saying that he needs any help. But Tzemach Tzedek knew what was going on. As the Rebbe Marash said, that Tzemach Tzedek, he was acting in a way similar to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov would speak about events that happened years and decades and hundreds of miles away. It's a similar way that the Tzemach Tzedek was completely in touch with what was going on in Petersburg with Rabbi Aaron. And the Tzemach Tzedek, poor Aaron is in a dilemma. And then a little while later, the Tzemach Tzedek said, Aaron is a bardas. Aaron is intelligent. He's maimed al daite. Clearly, what he meant with those words, maimed al daite, means he is, as Rebbe Marash explained, he is attuned, he has figured out what the Rebbe wants him to do. Not that he stands on his own opinion, but maimed al daite, he's in sync with daitoi, with the opinion of the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek, again, would sometimes before Shoshana, on Rosh Hashanah, he would talk about politics and thereby draw into the world, make a say there in Petersburg, to make some kind of order there. He would talk about it. Other Rebbeim would do something similar in thought, but not in speech. The Rebbe Marash said that thought is good and speech is certainly good. Today there is both, let this particular governor that wasn't good, let him be gone. And shortly afterwards, that governor that the Rebbe Rash mentioned on that Rosh Hashanah, he got sick. So in 5743, Rosh Hashanah, at the conclusion of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said that in regards to Torah mitzvahs, the Jewish people need to pay no heed to the government power. On the contrary, an order is made in the kingdoms throughout the world for the good of the Jewish people. Just like the Tzemach Tzedek, who made a Seder in Petersburg, made an order in Petersburg, so they said the Rebbe also on Rosh Hashanah, buying the Jewish people, Torah mitzvahs. They don't need the Jewish people because of in regards to their performance of Torah mitzvahs, they don't need to pay any attention to the government. And there basically was drawing a line between the Tzemach Tzedek Din Rosh Hashanah to what was happening at that Farbrengen, that we also don't need to pay any attention to the government is saying about our performance of Torah mitzvahs. And so shortly afterwards, a few weeks later, Leonid Brezhnev died, and he wasn't anything good for the Jewish people. He was succeeded by Yuri Andropov, who was a lot better, but he wasn't the greatest either. And the following year, the Rebbe again spoke about how the Tzemach Tzedek, Rosh Hashanah would speak and he'd make an order in Petersburg. And then that year, Andropov died, and that led to Gorbachev being elected. And Gorbachev actually began Perestroika and again a whole new season for the Jewish people and their freedom in Soviet Russia. So bottom line is that the Man Malkei Rabbanan, who are the kings, the tzaddikim, and the performance of Torah mitzvahs actually is beyond nature and changes nature. There was a remarkable chassid, a Lulavar chassid, whose name was Rabbi Tzin Grossman, just passed away the past month. And Tzin Grossman, although he was a Lulavar chassid, he had a very unique appreciation for the Rebbe's miracles. There was a woman, who asked the Lulavar Rebbe for a blessing or advice about a certain shidduch that came up for her. She had become closer to Judaism as a result of her connection to Hasidus and Chabad, and therefore she wanted to have a picture of the Rebbe in her living room when she would get married. But she said her groom-to-be is against it. And so she wants to ask advice, is what should she do? She wants to have this picture, and her groom doesn't like it. But he's a very fine young man. So Lulavar Rebbe told her, Lulavar Rebbe, he's not a Chabad chassid, he's a Rebbe of his own right. So Lulavar Rebbe said to her, she should break the shidduch. She should not go on with the shidduch. He said to her, the fact that he doesn't want to have a picture of the Rebbe means he has a lack of reverence for Hashem. And therefore he advises her not to continue, not to get married. However, Lulavar Rebbe said, since you have this person in your life, you shouldn't leave him without any direction at all. You should make sure that he hears, you should give him, the Lulavar Rebbe is saying, tell him that I want you to give him tapes that he can listen to the Rebbe singing and the Rebbe saying Torah, so that should have an effect on him in a positive way. Because the Lulavar Rebbe said that when a Jew hears the Rebbe speaking, and hears stories of the Rebbe, it actually has a major effect in their lives. So Rabbi Tzin Grossman, he kept diligently a lot of stories of the Rebbe, which were publicized in the Krachman magazine, some of them. And he would say that because he's a chassid of Lulavar Rebbe, therefore he is very interested in publicizing miracles of the Rebbe, because the Lulavar Rebbe said, when you publicize stories of the Rebbe, it has a major effect and inspires people. So on that note, a few stories that Rabbi Grossman shared. One story, I personally was privy to meet the son of the protagonist of the story. This gentleman, Uzi Biton, who was serving in the Israeli army. Unfortunately, he was hit with a grenade, and this grenade caused his hand to come off. And although they did many operations trying to put it together, the doctors basically said that unless he's able to have movement in his hand, they're going to have to amputate his hand. Unless the movement comes back, they're going to have to amputate. So at that period in his life, people advised him he should go to the Rebbe, ask the Rebbe for a bracha. So he came to the Rebbe, and he took a tape recorder and put it into his pocket. And I heard the story from this man's son myself. His son was in LA about 7 years ago, and he told me the story himself. But Tzin Grossman also had heard the story. And this is one of the stories he shared. He said that my father went in. This guy went into Rebbe, and he had two questions. One was he wanted to bless him for his hand, and the second was he wanted to get married. He wanted Rebbe's advice about a shidduch. So the Rebbe told him that he should make sure when he goes back to Israel to conclude the shidduch as soon as possible and get to get married. And the Rebbe said, you'll have a refuah shlema for your hand immediately. So he walked out of the Rebbe's room, and he had a tape recorder in his pocket. And his son told me that you hear a cry, a scream in the tape, because he was able to take tape recorder out and to turn it off with his hand that didn't have movement after he set the grenade. He had refuah, and the Rebbe said immediately. Unfortunately, the other part of the story was that when he got back to Israel, he wanted to get married as soon as possible, but his fiance was not interested in such a quick wedding. But then, unfortunately, she lost her father, and because she lost her father, the wedding had to be delayed a lot more because of the mourning period and the halachic issues of getting married during the mourning. So that clearly the Rebbe wanted that her father should be able to attend the wedding, and therefore the wedding should be done as soon as possible. One last story. There was Rick Grossman said that there was a young man who was very diligent in his performance of mitzvahs, and he wanted to get a new pair of tefillin. And he bought a new pair of tefillin. And this guy, he said, was a very joyous person, very happy person. And as soon as he got this new pair of tefillin, his mood changed. And his brother is a Chabad, and his brother is a Chassid Rebbe. So his brother noticed this change in him. He told him that he should ask the Rebbe for a bracha. But knowing that the Rebbe generally advises people to check their tefillin, he didn't want to. He said, the Rebbe doesn't tell me to check my tefillin. I just got a new pair of tefillin. I don't want to check my tefillin. His brother's like, listen, you want to ask the Rebbe for a bracha. Whatever. I'm just telling you, you want to do this. Took a little while, weeks and months. Finally, he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, asked her for a bracha for his new change in mood and his depression. What should he do? And the Rebbe responded, should check his tefillin. So he brought his tefillin to the man who wrote the tefillin, a brand new tefillin. And the man who wrote the tefillin said, you shouldn't get your tefillin checked now. Your tefillin were hermetically sealed. You don't want to mess around with them now. I mean, it's going to ruin them. But he insisted. The sofa opened the tefillin, and he was shocked by what he saw. What did he see? There's a line in the sections of the Shema that are in the tefillin. I will give grass to your animals in the field. So the Hebrew word grass is spelled ayin sin base, but in his tefillin it was spelled, instead of ayin sin base, it was spelled ayin sadik base, which ayin sadik base means sadness. I will give you sadness. So Baruch Hashem, he changed his tefillin, and with the change of his tefillin, Baruch Hashem, that also changed his mood. One last story that Rabbi Grossman shared. There are more, but just for now, for time, one more story. Rabbi Grossman said that he had an acquaintance whose son was very very challenged in his observance of Judaism, to say the least, and he left Judaism. And his father wanted to ask the Rebbe for a bracha. His father, the Rebbe, will give $1 on Sunday, and he went by the Rebbe to get a blessing for his son. But he wasn't sure the protocol of what you say and what you don't say to the Rebbe. And he asked one of the secretaries, how could he present to the Rebbe about his request for his son? So he asked the wrong guy, because the secretary of the Rebbe was very vigilant to protect the Rebbe's health. And then he said, don't say anything. You go by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe knows what's going on. You don't have to say a word. You just go by, and the Rebbe has Ruach HaKodesh, the Rebbe has divine inspiration. You don't have to say anything. Just go by the Rebbe and don't say anything. So, okay, that's what he's supposed to do. That's what I'll do. He goes by the Rebbe, it doesn't say a word. It gives him $1 bracha v'atzlacha. And as he's walking away, the Rebbe calls him back. The Rebbe says, this is for your son. Okay, find one more story. One great story that Rabbi Grossman shared. Unbelievable story. Actually, Moshe Bleich from Wellesley, Massachusetts, he was very inspired by this story, and this story actually brought him to become closer to Chassidus, which is a story in itself. Either way, it was a group of It was after Yontif, it was after Pesach, and a group of Hasidim. Rabbi Grossman said the details of the story, different angle. He said that he would meet people from other. He said you don't have to be a chassid of the Rebbe to hear stories of the Rebbe. He said I travel around, I meet all kinds of people. I'm not my chassid myself. And I was once in this show, and these people were talking about just like a reunion of different friends that got together. And one of the friends says, I teach in a Lubavitch yeshiva. Another guy, part of the conversation, is like, oh, Lubavitch, like very disparaging. So one guy gets up and he says, you're saying something disparaging about Lubavitch? Listen, let me tell you a story. He said, it was after Pesach. They went with a few guys together to go to Keshel Bracha to get a wine from the Rebbe. As many Jews who live near Crown Heights would go after Yontif, they would go to get wine from the Rebbe's cup that would distribute after every Yontif. So after Pesach, we went together. And my friend couldn't move his right hand. So although the custom is to accept the wine in your right hand, put out his left hand, that's the only hand can move. And the Rebbe said to him, put out your right hand. And so he doesn't put out his right hand because he can't put out his right hand. But they said to him again, put out your right hand. And a third time. And the Gabbai, the attendant of the Rebbe, was like, come on, man, the Rebbe's talking to you. Listen, it's not your choice. He puts out his right hand. And this was such an amazing miracle that the guy who was with him in this, Rabbi Bleich was there also, but besides Rabbi Bleich, another man was with him. And this man wanted to ask them for a blessing for someone. Someone had asked this guy who was going to the Rebbe for wine. He said to him, please mention my name for the Rebbe because he had a serious health condition. Please mention my name for the Rebbe. But after seeing this guy put out his right hand suddenly, like, whoa, blew his mind. So he couldn't say anything to them. When he came by the Rebbe, he didn't say anything. He wanted to say, I want a blessing for my friend. This is his name. This is his mother's name. But he couldn't talk. So when he came by the Rebbe poured him wine. He said, "Refuah shleima." And the clear blue sky should have complete recovery. Bottom line is, Man Malkei Rabbanan, who are the kings, the tzaddikim, and therefore we don't have to be concerned about this person's in government, that person's in government. There's a Torah, there's Hashem, the purpose of creation, and stay connected to Torah mitzvahs, which are beyond nature, and that brings the salvation, the Jewish people, wherever they are, and should see B'kar Mamish. There's a time of Mashiach, time of Geula. Time of Geula, everything becomes very clear. As Rebbe said before the coming of Mashiach, Yizbaru v'yislamu, everything comes out in the open. Everything becomes very clear. Anti-Semitism is exposed. Why is it exposed now? Why is it so clear? Because the Shiach is coming, and therefore there's exposure of all the hidden hatred. It's coming out in the open, so that could be removed from the world. There's no reason to be afraid or concerned. On the contrary, time of Geula, time of Mashiach, and one more mitzvah could tip the scale. Chaim, a good devach, a freilich devach, as the Miriam, freilich devach, Rab David, Rab Beryl, Rab Baruch, Rab David.